Hi, and welcome to Nature Connections. Thanks to everyone who's watching this video. In the Nature Connections interview series, I talk to people from all paths of life, but who have one thing in common, which is that they help us to connect to nature and bring nature into our lives and our homes. So in today's episode, I'll be speaking with Bruce Saunders. Hi, Bruce. Thank you for joining me today. Well, for me, over a cup of it's actually not coffee, it's tea, but to keep me going. So I discovered Bruce during his work with the Urban Tree Festival. He did a presentation there this year, and I was so intrigued and seduced by what he does that I really wanted to have a chat with him on Nature Connections to learn more about his business and yeah, share this with everyone. So Bruce started an award-winning business called Saunders Seasonings, based in London, and I think you have a workshop in Essex as well. They produce their own London-sourced and low-carbon hardwoods for all kinds of businesses, creators, and makers. And the timber actually comes from fallen or cut trees. So you can tell us more about this, but around London. So it's all recycled and repurposed, which I find really fascinating. One of the trees actually that you had talked about in that presentation was a tree that was around the corner of where I used to live in Islington, the Gibson Square.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so immediately I connected to what you do and felt like, oh, I'd love to hear more. So I went to your workshop as well for a visit a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, I really can't wait for everyone to hear more from you. So if you could just start by telling us more about you, who's the man behind this, and why did you start this, and sort of where did the inspiration come from?
Um, I've been working in the events industry for many years. In my teens, I just couldn't wait to leave school. So I didn't stay on for further education. I just wanted to live life, really. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how I've continued. Both my elder brothers went to university, but it just wasn't for me. So I just wanted to come up to London as soon as possible. Playing in a band, and that kind of led into just kind of staying within that industry. But I've always kind of been a maker. My family's always been makers. We've always, my dad always had a workshop for us to go in and, nick his tools and nick his best timber and, make stuff. So, and in the events industry, I kind of eventually ran a production company. And we were doing quite a lot of set building, corporate set building, which is pretty soulless. It's quite high stress and fairly soulless, because there's no reuse. It's all just disposable. Anything you build, you design, serves its purpose for a week or so, and then you go and take it down and invariably bin it. There's very little that can be kind of reused. It's always struck me this thing about MDF. It's a great material in its way, but the thing that bugs me about MDF is that you can do a fit out. You go into a house, you do a £5,000 fit out in MDF, fitted wardrobes and shell, whatever. And the second you put your last tool down and walk out the door, it has no value. It's zero. And it has no reuse. You can't reuse MDF that well, really. It's already started to bend. It's started to, kind of come apart. And it's just kind of bothers me that for all the work and the design you've put into that material, it has no value. Whereas, you use different materials, particularly hardwoods. A shelf might have 4 different lives. That shelf will become possibly a smaller shelf. It will become different things until eventually it ends up kind of that size, where eventually it's thrown away or burned or whatever. So actually, hardwood has got, it's vastly outlasts most other materials. And people are just emotionally attached to wood and feel they can use it for something else. We have people that come to the workshop that just love browsing, and they have no kind of intended use for what they want to buy. They just want to buy something and keep it. So it's kind of quite inspiring. I mean, wood does that to you, because again, one sheet of MDF looks like another sheet of MDF. One plank of wood looks unlike no other plank of wood. If you go into the kind of softwoods, you know, your kind of pines, your mass-produced kind of pines, it's slightly different game, because obviously it's a much cheaper material, it's grown faster, it's more disposable in that sense. Hardwoods, just by their nature, take a lot longer to grow. And just, you know, they're harder wearing material, therefore they kind of can last a lot longer. But after leaving the kind of events industry, finally, I mean, in the end, I was head of production for Coco, the music venue in Camden. That used to be Camden Palace. But alongside that, I was doing a lot of you know, kind of fit out stuff, just general kind of joinery. But I just wanted to go back into using hardwoods, really, and that kind of led to kind of discoveries and meetings and so on. The fact that you can't buy British hardwood in London, the fact that 90% of hardwood in this country is imported, and yet Britain produces all the hardwood we need other than oak. All the other species, we can produce enough of what we already have here.
Really? Okay.
And yet we don't. We just choose to import it. So, and there was, I had to go 80 miles outside of London to buy some English cherry to make a bed, actually, at home. Had a chance meeting with a tree surgeon at the end of the road, who just told me what they did with the trees they were felling. And there was a building around the corner, an old council building used to buy parking tickets from, that was then sold to Barratt's Development, turned into flats. There was a large plane tree that was being felled there. So using my gig skills of blagging, managed to get the tree for free, turned up in a drop side. They kind of loaded me. They cut it into 3 sections.
Okay.
We took it off to Blackwell's workshop, and I got an immobile sawmill there, because I thought, let's just have a look and see if the wood's any good. Maybe London trees have felled because the wood isn't very good. Who knows? So I milled up this plane tree into just simple 1.5-inch boards, air dried it. So laid the boards out, put stickers between, built up a stack of, and left it for a year.
A year, okay.
Yeah, so left it for a year. I just kind of followed the manual. So I did a lot of reading into how to produce the best quality timber. And what was interesting is that every little detail of drying produces better quality timber. The fact that the base you put the timber on, if that's dead flat, that the stickers are accurate, that you compress the weight on top of the stack to kind of compress the timber into it.
Okay.
All those details make a difference to the quality of board you get out in the end, and it's true. So yeah, and after a year, after a year, I was then using the timber to make into things. Plus, I had a lot of interest from other makers at the workshop who started to buy timber from me, and I was like, yeah, okay, you know, I've got plenty of boards. And obviously, a short time later, it's like, damn, I haven't got any timber left. Let's go and get another tree. So it was a very slow start. I mean, if there's one lesson to be learned from timber, it's a very slow business. Very slow.
I mean, you have to wait a year to try it out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, experience has taught me many years later that you know, you can speed the process up, the drying process up, by adding a kiln. But actually, the whole the kind of skill of timber producing really is to have a lot of air drying timber, a lot of it, and then when it's air dry, it only takes a week to put that timber in the kiln for it to become properly kiln dried, because you only need to reduce it by another 8% or so. Excuse me. So that's the trick, is that you have a lot of air drying timber that's dry, and then you can pick according to what you're low on stock, because you've only then got an 8-day turnaround, or 10-day, whatever it is, as opposed to a 12-month turnaround.
Wow. So the kiln really shortens it dramatically. Like it allows you to really have a.
Well, I mean, you can kiln dry from green. So you cut from the log and you can go straight into the kiln from there. And that takes about 5-6 weeks. You can't do it to species that have tannin in, like oak, sweet chestnut, robinia, because the tannin attacks the kiln, attacks the element of the kiln, attacks the electrics. And oak just doesn't. Oak is actually kind of a real diva of a timber. If you imagine who the lead singer is in the timber industry, it's oak.
Love it.
It's such a pain in the arse, to be honest, when
You
you're
gotta
milling
develop
it.
it. It's beautiful. Yeah.
It's a nice timber, but it's strong and it colour matches very well, which is why it's very popular. But actually, it's quite aggressive timber to work with. It's the dust is quite aggressive, the tan is aggressive, it splinters quite easily. And when you're milling up a log, you suddenly find pockets of rot in it out of the blue. They just happen to be there. Oak, surprisingly, actually has a lot of woodworm in the sapwood. Any big oak tree will be pretty riddled with it. Incidentally, we use a steam kiln for a lot of our waney edge boards, because the temperature is above 65 degrees, and above 65 degrees, it then eliminates any little creepy crawlies living in the timber. And I used to get quite kind of freaked out about woodworm. It's just like, oh my God, we can't have timber with woodworm in it. But you realise after doing timber for quite a while that actually everything in life, you know, every species on the planet has a kind of likes to survive like we do, and they enjoy wood like we do, just in different ways.
They also have a purpose, but
they have, but you know, we have on the farm, we have birds nesting in the timber. There are mice in there. We have all sorts of insects that kind of, you know, live on the bark and so on. So I don't get freaked out about woodworm. I just kind of like, here we go again. And it's not a worm, it's a beetle. It's just the larva that goes into the timber. But yeah, so kind of back to the kind of start. That's where I started, and the timber was fantastic quality. London Plain is a very unusual timber because of the character it has, the incredible medullary rays, and we kind of have a little saying as we're milling that with plain and oak, we always chase the rays. The medullary rays, these, you see it in oak, they look kind of like stretch marks, but very beautiful kind of figuring. You see a lot in oak paneling. So, but we mill logs in different ways depending what they are, because ash, we rotate the log. We always take the boards from the outside in because of this beautiful figure you get from the outside. But with obviously oak and plain, you need to quarter saw to get that figure out.
Also, each of them really had their specificities, and you had to discover this along the way, I guess, because if you started with a plain tree and then you took some oak and cherry and elm, and it must have been quite a discovery trying to figure out like what's the best way to cut it. And
and also you just learn a lot from other people as well. You kind of see, you start to recognize the boards that you see from other producers or bought boards, and then you start to recognize the grain patterns, the grain orientation. In fact, it's very similar to the kind of meat producers in the way that you cut a steak. The grain, in effect, the fibers, the layout of the fibers in the steak make a different cuts of steak. And if you get that wrong, the steak becomes very hard to chew. So it's important you get it right, because it's then a very tender cut of steak, and timber is quite similar. So when you chew timber, it's important to
exactly. Well, you better not chew
cut
it.
it the right way. But obviously with urban timber, which is our kind of our speciality, you're faced with a lot of other issues as well. You get a lot of metal in the woods, be it nails, things people have put in, or with with plane trees.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot from Euston, and some of them were absolutely peppered with bomb shrapnel from World War II. So it can be a pain when you're milling because you have to dig it out. You can't hit it with a blade.
Mm-hmm.
It knocks the set out of the blade, and the blade starts giving you kind of uneven cuts.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have rot in it. You'll have, it can be expensive extracting good boards or usable boards from urban trees.
Mm-hmm. And so actually you told us like the first one you got for free, right? Like you managed to get those 3 pieces cut off of a London plane, and you tried it out. Where do you now source the trees? Like where is it? Specific places in London? Is it sort of all over London? How do you get the different trees?
Yeah, we still, I mean, to give you an idea of the kind of problems we face,
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to go out to to an estate somewhere and just buy an Arctic load of oak. And sometimes we do that because we just need standard oak, standard ash. We'll just buy it by an Arctic load. And the transport for an Arctic lorry is like 400 or 500 quid.
Okay.
And obviously you're paying for the timber on board of that. But in the last 2 weeks, we've had, we were offered a plane and a couple of chestnuts on a development site in Manor House. I'd been bugging him for a while, and the guy said, "Okay, if you come over and there's, we need to leave site." The demolition company turned up, had a look, and he was just going to. They'd already been crowned, so the top had been taken off his trees. Okay. They were just the trunks left, because they basically do that quickly to stop the birds nesting. Otherwise, that would stop them felling the tree altogether. So they just leave it, and then he was going to knock them over with a digger. It's just pretty unceremonious, isn't it? These big, beautiful trees, and
Not very respectful.
push them over with a digger. No, with the root ball there as well. And I kind of said, because transport is the biggest thing. It's so expensive in London and so problematic. And basically, the long and short of it is that I said that I could come on a Friday. I'll get my own transport in, and he then stopped communicating. And basically chipped them. He just got rid of them. Yeah. And I suspect that he got political. He spoke to one of his bosses, who then said, "No, you can't do that."
Okay.
They basically greenwash. They just chip the trunks, which happens to most London trees. They chip them, and in their minds, that's good enough. That's some kind of reuse. And that's our real bugbear. A council gave me a ring and said, "Look, we've had an emergency fell down near Euston. A big plane tree fell over and landed on some cars. But we've left the main stem if you want to come pick it up." So I sent one of my contractors. I used 2 contractors, one a big lorry, one a small lorry. Sent the small lorry, and he rang me and said he can't get into that area because there's too many cars, blah, 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 blah. So that cost me 100 quid for a failed delivery, a failed collection, and no tree. And it's like, it's, so this Saturday, we've got another big plane tree that's coming down near Denmark Hill Station. There'll be a road closure. So I think we'll be able to get that one. It's a huge plane, that one. But again, because it's a Saturday pickup, that's costing me £550 for the lorry, just to pick up one tree. So in a nutshell, that's why urban timber is more expensive, because it's so much more costly to get timber out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's transport. So we don't pay anything for the trees.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's,
there's a high risk associated with that, where you have to be ready to like not get anything in return, pay a lot of money for transport. And
and also it's a gamble in that you get offered a tree, but you don't know till it's felled whether it might be rotten inside.
Yeah, of course.
So this big plane on Saturday, it's likely it's got basal rot. So with the flare that comes up from the ground, you'll get the center, the core is often pretty rotted out. So, but we love it, and we do something different, and it's a challenge, and I do like a challenge.
And then actually another one of the benefits of what you do and what's beautiful is that it has like environmental benefits, right? Because you talked about the chipping and, you know, that people think that's good enough. But can you tell us a bit more about like why, like environmentally, like what you do is actually much better for recycling these trees?
Well, quite simply, a big mature tree, this idea that the government has had that that biomass fuel is sustainable, is carbon sustainable. It doesn't. It's just. It's not. It's not correct when it comes to big trees, because these trees have kind of sequestered carbon for 100, 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
And by burning that tree, you're just releasing all that carbon.
Mm-hmm.
It works when you have woodland that is replaced every 10, 15 years, and the timber taken from that woodland, there's the cycle. So it's kind of carbon neutral in that sense, because you're growing again to offset the carbon you've just released.
Mm-hmm.
So that's their model of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The model of throwing the idea of these big mature urban trees into this is just
Mm-hmm.
wrong. It's just
Mm-hmm.
and it takes, I think Pat, my kind of business, my business partner, kind of did a lot of research on this. He kind of figured out that it takes, for every mature tree felled in London, it takes 6 replacement trees, 20 years of growth to replace the carbon lost. It's enormous.
Yeah, it's huge.
And of course, if we're milling these trees into boards, that carbon is retained. Not only that, the cost of taking that tree very close by and milling it into boards and then bringing them back to London, you know, the kind of the Pat loves the circular economy as well. It's just a thing, but it's true. You know, we produce local timber and it goes back to the local community. That's where it ends up. And our main customer are the kind of small bespoke makers in London,
Okay.
and outside as well. But again, it's all the timber. Kind of, you know, it goes back to the kind of local economy. I mean, I think we've over the years actually created a kind of a mini market, almost a kind of a, you know, this with London Plane, because most people don't really know what London Plane is. I didn't. It's like a plane. What is a plane? What kind of? And you just don't know. But the timber is great, very unusual. Whereas actually a lot of people, local residents, this is, or they come into the workshop and they go, "We'd like some London Plane shelves, please."
Yeah.
They already know about it because their friends have already got London Plane. So, you know, Walthamstow area where our workshop is, London Plane is actually quite a go-to timber, and we sell 4 times the amount of London Plane than any other timber. Again, we're the only, because it's an urban species. It's not really grown outside, and it's not commercially farmed.
Yeah, so it's very unique that you do this, and that there's a demand for it.
Excuse me. Yeah, and you know, we're the only ones that stock it as standards. Other people sell it when they have it. It's like English walnut. It's such a rarity. You can never say you've got it. You just sell it when you have it.
Yeah.
But plain, we always have it because we're in London. So I think the other issue is that for London Plain particularly is that it has so many different looks, you know, in terms of the colour and the character, the figure, that it's quite a difficult timber for people to do a furniture range in it. So that's probably also why it's not a commercial timber.
Of course.
Because when you do a range of furniture, you want photos that you do, the photo shoot. If you produce a different chair, your customer will go, but I want one like the photo. And you're like, blame it's different. Which is why so much of our timber goes to the bespoke market rather than the kind of the production line market. Because production line, they just want 100 of the same thing. And this is where oak is very
that doesn't
popular.
work.
Because it colour matches all the time. Every oak tree matches every oak tree.
And so tell me more about your clients then. So you told us, you supply mostly makers and bespoke furniture making. Do you have the story of what is the most sort of surprising client that you had, or use for your wood that That's
Excuse me, it's early in the morning.
no worries.
We've got some very interesting customers. One of our big customers, in fact, is a company called Foresso,
Okay.
and they take all our waste products, mainly plain actually, and they slice the offcuts like bread. They chip those chips, 3.5 mil slices. They chip those slices into tiny little chips, overlay them on birch ply, and then overlay that with a kind of a resin, and it turns into these kind of terrazos with a kind of terrazzo style top. But they're really big on kind of being eco-friendly and reuse. So the resins they use are very friendly. And Connor, who runs it, he started, he appeared with a backpack at the workshop and just took some offcuts. He just finished college and was interested in kind of pursuing his idea of reuse. And now they're a big company up in the Midlands. They got 15
And what do they make, tables or what is
well,
it?
they essentially they make panels, so 8x4 sheets, but they've now gone into CNC, so they make flooring, and they've just started making essentially like kind of IKEA style furniture, like flat pack furniture, but really good quality and design. So, but we provide a lot of timber for them now, which is great because a lot of our milling byproducts we can properly dry them. They're kind of sent into them.
Yeah.
Another client is Bellaby Globes. They make custom world globes which are hand painted, and the bases for these are wood. And they get London plain off us for turning blanks to turn into the bases. And these globes sell for vast amounts of money, which is great because it means those bases, the London plain bases, will be there for hundreds of years to come. The rule is the more expensive the product, the longer life it has. So there's a new theatre being built in King's Cross, and we got contacted by the architect, and they specified very interested in using a local timber. They love London plain, so we've now been nominated as the supplier for London plain for all the handrail in this theatre.
The handrail.
All the hands, so it's like 200 meters of handrail in this theatre will be London plain from Euston, literally a few hundred yards from where the, from where the trees grew. Yeah. That's exciting. It's such a great story.
It's so wonderful. Yeah.
And to think that actually, because again, timber for me is about it's a tactile material. There's nothing nicer than running your hands over the wood. Again, it's why we use oil rather than a varnish or a lacquer, because it transmits the feeling into your fingers of the timber directly, whereas lacquer and varnish are a protection of the timber, and that's what you feel as the lacquer and the varnish, not the wood. So if you feel your face, if you put moisturizer on, you feel that's like I do every morning.
Yeah, of course.
Clearly
oil
not.
your face.
Yeah, but that's what you do to your skin, and it feels lovely. If you put varnish or lacquer on your face, that's what you're terrible.
Some people do.
You look like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the example of another customer. A lot of kind of bespoke, commissions. So lots of tables, lots of furniture. Anything from kind of bowl turners. Artists who just buy chunks and turn them into different stuff. There's 1,000,001 different uses for wood,
of course,
or hardwood in particular.
Well, I came to the workshop also thinking, how could I use your wood to make the frames that I use? So maybe that's something we can explore.
Yes,
making some frames. Yeah, it's incredible, all the different uses that it has. And it's interesting that it's not only, it's coming back to London a lot, it seems, but also like with the first company you mentioned, it's also, going outside of London and being reused in furniture pieces and countertops that'll be all over the country.
Well, their stuff goes around the world, actually.
Around the world, even.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
So
Do you
and
know
it's just,
of initiatives like this in other countries? Have you explored or met people who do this in different cities
um,
even, or?
Pat found a company in, I'm trying to remember where it was Oregon
Mm-hmm.
in the States, who are kind of set up to repurpose their timber.
Mm-hmm.
But they're on a slightly different scale to us in terms of it's more a goodwill thing rather than a commercial venture. I
Okay,
mean, we are first and foremost
of course. Mm.
a commercial company.
Mm-hmm.
Commercial means that, you know, we do it as any normal company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I hasten to say also we don't make any money at this.
Mm.
It's one day we hope we will, but like any kind of small company, the money just goes into more growth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and particularly with wood, if we get a tree that we've, you know, like this plane in South London, it's going to cost us £500 for transport.
Yeah,
It's
true.
going to cost us probably another £600 to mill it,
Mm-hmm.
plus the time taken to deal with it, stick it,
Mm.
then to kiln dry it. So we're going to be, you know, by and
Mm.
large, 1,500 quid down for at least a year and a half before any of those boards come to market. So it's a long, slow process.
It is a very long, yeah, very slow process. Yeah. Wow.
So
You've shared with us a lot of the challenges, like you talked about the what is it, the all the pieces of metal that you find in the wood that you have to sometimes the saw hits, and then the cost of obviously of transport and all the risk associated with sending out a truck and then not having a tree in return. What is, you know, you talked to us a little bit about obviously the reward, which is the final piece, you know, being seeing that hand railing, that piece of furniture. But can you tell us a bit more about what is rewarding about working, you know, so close to nature, working with trees and working with such a special material?
I'm going to show you.
Oh,
We're going to go on tour.
there we go.
We're going downstairs. Just bear with me.
Yeah,
Let's see if you can. Let's see if I
the
turn that on.
undercover.
So this is a unit that we had. I'm at home,
Wow,
so I don't know. This is a unit
incredible.
that in fact one of our amazing makers, Christina,
Mm.
made. And so here,
Mm.
let's just try and see what it is. So
That
this is
green.
so this is spalted hornbeam from West London.
Mm-hmm. Incredible.
I'm not very good at the camera thing.
Yeah, yeah, we can see it very well.
You can see that. So these are solid, and this is just a routed
Yeah,
pull. It's called a
handle.
European draw pull router bit.
Oh yes.
So obviously that's, you know, it's just,
Oh
these
wow.
are just solid wood fronts, but they've
Yeah.
stayed true.
Yeah.
So here we have, you can see the grain flow there across so it's the
Yeah.
same kind
It
of
looks like
board
a
that goes
painting.
across. It is a painting. I
Yeah.
think up the top, I don't know if you can see that. You can see the owl. Maybe you can see the owl, perhaps not. Up here, you've got elm. These are street trees from Eastbourne.
You can very well see the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Further down here, I don't know if you can see that. That's London Plain.
That's London Plain. Wow.
These go down. Yeah.
It looks like almost like cherry wood. It's so.
Yeah, it slightly darkens over time. And across here, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, yeah.
Spalted beech. So these two, sorry, these two drawers are spalted beech down here. What do we got down here? And this one, funnily enough,
you've made a complete medley of all your all your wood.
Well, it's just a bit of fun, really.
Yeah.
In being able to use these timbers. That one, sorry, was that's Pippi and Burr apple.
Oh, wow.
From a tree over in West London. And the whole carcass, in fact, was made with, you can see if we stand back further, that's all olive ash that was basically then planked up to make into this kind of panels. And with
design, that natural design is incredible.
With a walnut, solid walnut kind of carcass end. So yeah, my wife's an architect, so she comes up with these amazing designs, and then we have to build them somehow.
Yeah. But she
So
must love it, being able to use all these materials, all this wood.
yeah, well, yeah. She does tend to come in and pick the best bits of wood and write her name on them, so we can't sell them or use them for anything else.
But that's incredible that you made a unit that combines, like, it's like a London forest.
Yeah, it kind of is actually. We had a space. We live in a tiny little house in Camden, so space is a real issue. So that was our kind of solution to put shoes and coats and all that kind of stuff in.
Wow. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. It definitely puts like, it gives the feeling, the full feeling for your business and what you do, and the love of wood.
Yeah.
Great. What I have one last question, really, which is what I ask everyone, but I guess maybe it's tricky for you. But like, what is do you have one tree? Is there a specific tree in your life that is sort of particularly meaningful to you? I mean, like, living rooted tree rather than rather than the wood you make from it. Like, is there a specific tree in your life that echoes something for you? And if not, like, if there's a specific wood that you like to work best with.
I remember. I mean, I was born in the north of England, but so my dad is was and his grandpa kind of Mozambique, South Africa.
Okay.
My mum's English, so I was born here, but when I was 6 weeks old, was taken out. Although as a family, we moved to Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia as it was then. And then at some point we had to leave. Politically, it was too difficult. So my dad bought a little yacht off Mozambique, and we actually sailed around from Mozambique to England, so via South Africa and Brazil. It took about a year and a half. So it was a huge journey for us.
Wow.
As a kids, as family. It was just in a little sailing boat. Which he actually wrote he turned it into a book, which became a kind of a yachty's bestseller. But when we left, so we went from Mozambique down to South Africa. I remember having an avocado pip, and I planted it in one of our friends' gardens there. And in fact, no, sorry, I grew it on the boat. So when you put an avocado pip, you put kind of what do you call them, like toothpicks either side, and you balance it in a jar of water, and then it grows a root and grows a top. So I had this, then it got obviously a tiny little boat. So I then planted it in their friend's garden, and 20, 30 years later, it was this huge tree. It's still there today. So it's just this enormous tree. So that's probably the kind of the biggest thing I've kind of thought of in terms of a tree.
You've planted a bit of yourself, a bit of your roots over there as well.
Yeah. It's too far for me to go down and turn it into planks, but
don't do that.
No,
let it live as long as you do.
Avocados. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Bruce, and thanks for telling us everything about your business. And it's just wonderful that you found a use, and you recycle these beautiful trees that surround us in the city. Well, I'm not here today, but I live in London, and I can really appreciate that there's a real soul to each of these trees, and the fact that we can have that close to us, even after they've fallen, and have a second life, a third life, or like an infinity of lives, like you say. Like I love hearing that, and it's wonderful. I hope to see you in person at the workshop. I'll drop by. Yeah. So thanks so much. And thanks, Bruce.
All right.
Bye.
See you later.